Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Wes Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to discuss, unfortunately, Wes, a 31-29 loss at the hands of the Minnesota Vikings last Sunday. And I'm just going to start by saying this. This is my 19th season covering the Packers for Packers.com, and my days of covering Packers games extends back mid-90s, late 90s, early 2000s before I got here. That game, if it's not the most bizarre football game I have seen, it definitely ranks up there. That was just a weird football game.
Yeah, I've definitely put it in my top five. The 2013 Matt Flynn replacing Scott Tolzien and then them tying the Vikings is pretty high on my list.
Yeah, that one was bizarre for sure.
And then 2 weeks later, Matt Flynn leading a 23-point halftime comeback was kind of weird.
On the road, no less.
On the road. And then obviously for me, it's the Hail Mary game in Detroit. Those are like the creme de la creme. This is right underneath that in terms of just the peculiarity of it. I mean, it was one of those games, too, that the game got over with, and I'm standing there waiting to get in the locker room. You go to the auditorium for Matt and Jordan's pressers. I'm standing outside getting my notes together for the availability, and I'm like, I didn't know how to make heads or tails of that game because, okay, it could have went one of two ways here. The Packers could have won, which was completely on the table in the second half.
Yes.
And they also could have gotten completely blown out when they were down 28-0. It seemed like nothing could go right. It ends up being a 31-29 game, which is just sort of the weirdest outcome possible in a game in which the Packers had real chances to win late in the fourth quarter. But all that put together, I looked at it this way. As I laid my head down to go to bed on Sunday night, I'm like, if you were ever going to have a quote-unquote, I'm not calling it this because I know fans will go nuts, but that preseason type game, allowing Jordan Love just to get into a rhythm and find himself a little bit and just get the throws out and get the rust off, that was kind of it.
Yeah.
He found Jayden Reed. He had some really nice throws to Dontavian Wicks. The defense did some good things. It wasn't good enough to win, and the Packers have a vast amount of corrections to make. But by and large, I left that game, for as bad as I felt about it prior to Daniel Whelan's punt in the second quarter.
Yeah.
I walked out of that game being like, all right, these guys are going to be fine.
Yeah, that's the thing is up until the Vikings gave the Packers that gift with the muff punt late in the first half that allowed for the Packers to get a touchdown before halftime and to stay at least within shouting distance of the Vikings going into the third quarter. Up until that point, with a 28-0 score, there was just absolutely nothing that went right for Green Bay. The defense gave up the 3 consecutive touchdowns on Minnesota's first 3 possessions. And that included, allowing a 3rd and 14 on the opening drive after a potential interception was dropped. Then on the next 2 touchdown drives, if the Packers defense even got them in third down, it might have been 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2. They never even felt like they had a legitimate chance to get off the field. Offensively, the first 4 possessions, in whatever order, result in 2 missed field goals and 2 interceptions. So it really doesn't get too much worse than that. And the second interception then sets up Minnesota's 4th touchdown with a short field. They punch it in, and it's 28-0. It was just a case of, if something could go wrong, it did. And then as this crazy NFL works, from that point, suddenly with roughly 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the score is 28-22. The Lambeau crowd is into it. And the Packers have a legitimate chance to pull off what would have been the biggest comeback in franchise history, which is 23 points. It's been done twice. A comeback from 28 points, but the Vikings settled things down. They did what they needed to do. The Packers then reverted to making mistakes, a couple of more turnovers in the fourth quarter when the game was still within reach. It's hard to make head or tail of it, but I'm with you in that for as awful as things were for pretty much the entire first half, you left that game saying, yeah, okay, it's a tough loss. It stinks. There's all kinds of stuff to work on, but the Packers are going to be okay here. This was not just a complete and total utter collapse against a division rival. They stood up, they fought back, they gave themselves a chance. It didn't work out. And Minnesota's sitting on top of the NFC North at 4-0, the only undefeated team in the NFC right now. The only other undefeated team in the league is the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. But it's, it's pretty simple to just say, all right, you get back to work, get your work done, get on the plane, go to LA and try to chalk up win number 3. That's all this week is about.
That's what it is. It's trying to correct what you need to correct. The Packers are 1 month into this thing. I wrote an insider inbox. They're 2-2. They're sitting in the same boat they were last year, but this team is much better than they were 365 days ago. The offense is more explosive. Jordan Love is so much more confident, albeit somewhat hobbled with this knee going into this game. And then defensively, I think there's been some real bright spots. I mean, it was not an encouraging start. Sam Darnold was way too comfortable. They had way too much success. But, whether it was, what you might have missed or some of the other, different types of film review stuff that's out there, I mean, you give credit to what Kevin O'Connell did. I mean, they did a lot structurally with their offensive linemen, a lot with their overall philosophy of offense to be able to get into that rhythm that they did early on. It wasn't just like, okay, there was breakdown after breakdown. It was a dropped interception that could have shifted tide with Isaiah McDuffie.
Absolutely.
It was Naylor, I believe it was, leaking out on 3rd and 14 and being able to get the first down. And then after that, it just seemed like the Packers couldn't catch a break there for about the next 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Once they slowed things down, you started to see the team that we saw in Nashville. The problem is that when you're playing from behind like that, you have to take more chances with the football. You're not going to run the ball as the way you want to. And Tucker Kraft trying to make a play ends up fumbling, with a really nice play by Byron Murphy Jr. That's the precarious position you're in when you're playing from behind. And the Packers just weren't. They set themselves so far back from the cart. It was hard getting that thing reattached to pull out a victory.
Yeah, I mean, a few thoughts defensively. One, the Packers were in a tough spot going in when they found out on Friday that Jair Alexander couldn't practice. A groin injury was added to the injury report. He was already on the report with a quad injury, but he had been limited in practice. Then the groin pops up. LaFleur actually then said after the game, it happened during Thursday's practice. He wasn't able to practice on Friday. He was out for the game. Carrington Valentine was also out. So the Packers are going into this game when you've got Justin Jefferson on the other side, and 2 of your top 4 cornerbacks are on the sideline. The 2 of your top 4 who are available are Eric Stokes and Keyshawn Nixon. Nixon being mostly a slot guy, but then he gets forced into playing, some boundary corner. And I think that the situation in the secondary and the fact that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are a pretty darn good pair of receivers, I think that influenced Jeff Hafley trying to stick with the 4-man rush. He didn't want to really come after Darnold and make, from a numbers perspective, the secondary and the coverage that much more vulnerable. And the 4-man rush just couldn't get there. This is an example of once you get into a season, there are things that are on tape and other teams are going to be prepared.
Yep.
We have seen through the first 3 weeks of the season the Packers' defensive front 4, and they've had a good rotation using lots of different guys, but whoever's been out there, when they do a straight 4-man rush, they've been doing a lot of stunts, a lot of guys cutting inside, trying to essentially run like a pick play type of thing within the defensive line to free somebody up. And the Vikings just looked like they were prepared for every single one of those that the Packers tried to run with the 4-man rush. They were picking everything up. They were executing their pass protection. And the Packers only really were able to harass Darnold a couple of times in the second half when they did bring the extra pressure. So Packers were kind of behind the 8 ball defensively with the late injury to Alexander, and then things with what they were planning just didn't really work out, and the snowball started running downhill. That said, Xavier McKinney keeps points off the board with his 4th interception in 4 games. Quay Walker comes on a blitz and gets a 13-yard sack that leads to a punt for the Vikings. And Keyshawn Nixon comes off the slot on the blind side. The Vikings don't pick it up. You get the sack fumble, and that's leads to a touchdown that gets the Packers back into the game. So the defense made some big plays, but the Vikings were just in command for so long and building that 28-point lead that the way everything ultimately unfolded, it was too little too late.
Couple things stood out to me when I was reviewing this game. One, they were not going to let Kenny Clark wreck this game for them. The amount of help that they gave Garrett Bradbury, the amount of help and chipping they did on the edges, you have to make a play. I'm not saying you don't. I mean, defensive linemen, defensive edge rushers, you still have to find a way to generate pressure, to create opportunities for yourself. But the thing about, you talk about the Packers and how they have to adjust to having Justin Jefferson out there and Jordan Addison. The benefit for the Minnesota Vikings is when you have weapons like that people have to pay so much attention to, there's things you can do in your offensive front to be able to compensate for that. Green Bay eventually did start to find answers in the second half. This is something I brought up on Twitter. Some people had mentioned to me this is something that Sean McVay's been doing in LA. I have not been privy to it, but this idea of basically lining up your running back a yard in front of your quarterback in shotgun, that's a thing to kind of take away the A-gap blitzes and some of the pressure inside. But then Jeff Hafley had the right call to defend against that when he sent Keyshawn Nixon on that blitz right off the edge, off the strong side edge, and it leads to a big play. They started to find the answers. I think Quay Walker, this game was a perfect embodiment of the type of player Quay Walker can be in this defense when used appropriately. Edgerrin Cooper gets a fumble recovery off of the Keyshawn Nixon play. There were a lot of positives to show to, but again, when you fall behind 28-0, there's certain things that are going to go against you. The Packers ran 76 offensive plays in this game. They actually ended up dominating time in possession, like I talked about, but it's because of the interceptions. It's because of the turnovers. The Packers can clean some of those things up if they can avoid 5 penalties in the first quarter.
Yeah.
There are opportunities here for them to really become a very good football team. Hopefully, Jordan Love being back in the lineup, getting his comfort level, getting his timing back with his receivers is going to help. But as we saw, Mike, down, whether it's Christian Watson getting injured or Devontae Wyatt going down with the ankle, there's still going to be adversity that Green Bay is going to have to respond to. And seeing how guys step up to that is going to be the real challenge.
Yeah, it was an interesting game for Jordan Love. He comes back after missing 2 games with the knee injury. He's playing with the brace on his left knee. And you could see in the early going, and he admitted it himself, his accuracy was a little bit off. The throws were not quite there. Some of them were still catchable. The passes could have been better. The catches still could have been made. And the Packers were, they were struggling there, stalling out. Vikings made a really good play. The middle linebacker made a really good play on the first interception. Where he basically read Love's eyes, and instead of staying with the tight end who was running the deep seam, kind of the go down the middle, who's supposed to clear out that middle linebacker, he stayed home because he saw that Love was going to try to go to Christian Watson there. Unfortunately, then Watson gets hurt on that play, and he's going to be out for at least a little while here. The second interception for Love, I thought it was bad luck. It was bad luck for Love. The route combination wasn't run quite right, and so then Musgrave didn't realize the throw wasn't intended for him. It was intended for Dobbs behind him. It ends up getting deflected twice and then picked off. But then Love started to settle down. The accuracy started to come around. They're moving the ball and getting some things done. But then he almost starts feeling it a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Because then when it's 31-22, about 6 minutes to go, and it's a first down, and he responds to the blitz off the edge by Harrison Smith by trying to take the shot deep down the field, one-on-one for Wicks against Murphy, and Wicks really had no chance to catch that ball. So, like I say, almost feeling a little bit too good, tries to make too much of a hero play, and that thwarts the comeback effort. In the end, it was a little bit of everything game. I mean, Jordan Love set career highs across the board: completions, attempts, the 389 yards, the 4 touchdowns, also tied his career high with 3 interceptions. So, kind of all over the board there. The best news about it is that one, from a health standpoint, he looked better as the game went on.
Yeah.
He looked like he settled in. And from everything that we've heard, other than the knee being sore, which is to be expected, he did take a hit on the one scramble in the second quarter. But health-wise, he came out of it no worse for wear, and he should be able to practice the requisite amount of reps this week to get ready to play the Rams. And hopefully, just having this first game, dealing with, how to play with the knee, dealing with it, managing it the way he needs to manage it throughout the course of the game. he's now been through that. And now it's just all eyes looking forward.
Yeah, and it's about just getting back into where he was at the end of last season. And certainly I thought that was one of the brilliant things about what Jordan Love did in that second half. We talked so much about how impressive his numbers were and how well he played during that, but he played a lot of that without Christian Watson. He played a lot with it with some injuries up front, and he still was the catalyst. He was the constant. He was the guy that drove this offense. That's where they need to get back to now, especially if they're not going to have Watson for however amount of time, especially if there's certain things, Tucker Kraft has kind of been battling through a shoulder injury. When the chips were down last year, Jordan Love was the one that was pulling everybody together. And to have him back, I think you felt the energy with that. Kraft even mentioned just hearing him in the huddle gave them just a little bit more confidence, knowing that the field general is back out there. And I thought more importantly for me, it was just that second half, just seeing Jordan Love look like himself again. And you're right, he probably felt it a little bit too much at times, but seeing him hopping, seeing him looking downfield, seeing him having that confidence, standing tall in the pocket, that's vintage Jordan Love. That's who this quarterback is. And and now seeing where they can bring this thing. I mean, they lost to a very good Minnesota Vikings team. Now they're going to be taking on, and we'll preview it on Thursday, but they're going to be taking on an LA Rams team that is one very narrow win over the 49ers away from being 0-4. They're going to be facing an Arizona Cardinals team in their own house here that has showed a lot of promise and explosivity with their offense, but still is 1-3 and having some stuff to come back from. So they got 2 wins against the AFC. They got 2 losses against the NFC.
Yep.
They're 0-1 in what potentially could be the best division in football this year. This is where you need to be able to take what you did wrong, shore up some of those details, and now become the team and get together with these wins that they ended up getting late last season, but probably would have been a little bit easier on them if they could have gotten that together in October and November.
Yeah, and I want to just touch on this as well because it's representative of kind of how this game went. Aaron Jones makes his return to Lambeau Field. 22 carries for 93 yards, a pretty productive day. Doesn't get a touchdown, does his Lambeau leap with some Viking fans after the game is over. But those 22 carries, 8 of the 22, the Packers held Jones to 1 gain or less, 0 or negative yardage. The other, he essentially got the 93 yards on the other 14 carries because there weren't a whole lot of 3 and 4 yard runs. It was either 0 or 1, or he was busting out for 12 or 14. So the whole feast or famine nature of the way the Packers played run defense in this game was kind of a microcosm of how everything went on all sides of the ball here. And you don't want to be riding that roller coaster and whatnot, but I think there's plenty to look at to correct, but there's also plenty out there that shows the Packers, all right, yeah, we can do this. We just have to do it more consistently and do it more often, and I think that's what you have to try to hang your hat on moving forward.
Aaron Jones won the football game, so that's paramount, but he didn't beat the Packers, and that was the goal of this thing. Kenny Clark even said it when I was talking to him afterwards in the locker room. It was almost kind of surprising how much they got away from the screen game. They had some success with that early, and then that went away. So when they were talking about adjustments and all that, Kenny even said, he's like, it's not like there was that many adjustments. We defended the run pretty well. It was sort of those screens that he was leaking out on early that we were kind of having a hard time adjusting to, and then the Vikings just stopped. So for him to go out of this game with a 17-yard long carry, averaging 4.2 yards per carry, that's not why the Packers lost this game. They lost it because they got off to a very slow start, and when they needed that stop in the fourth quarter, they couldn't get it. And again, I will say this one last time because you've had to read this in my inboxes a couple times now. I give Kevin O'Connell a lot of credit for how he handled that fourth quarter.
Yep.
There's a lot of people, maybe even myself included, that would have tucked tail and started running 2 yards into a brick wall to protect the lead and to drain the clock. He said, no, Sam Darnold made a mistake. We're going to come out. We're going to throw this thing. I have Justin Jefferson on my sideline. Yep. We're going to get the ball to our playmakers. And they shot downfield and got the 3 points they needed ultimately to put this thing out of reach.
Yeah, the bottom line is the Vikings are paying Justin Jefferson $35 million, and when the game was on the line, even though they had a lead, they could have milked the clock. It was like, no, our $35 million man is the guy who's going to win this game, and we're gonna go to him. That's what we're paying him for. And O'Connell just stayed aggressive, kept dialing it up, and they were able to, at the 28-22 point, They were able to drive it down the field, mostly thanks to Jefferson, and get the field goal that made it a 2-score game again, and then the Packers were really playing uphill.
And it's 1 month. There's a lot of time to go, but I mean, Sam Darnold is making himself a lot of money with the way he's playing right now. I think Sam Darnold is proving. I go back to that 2018 draft, and Sam Darnold was my guy. That was the one I thought when everyone was talking about who are these 5 quarterbacks, who could be the franchise guy. I thought Sam Darnold was the number 1 overall pick, personally. And it did not go well with the Jets. It went even worse with the Panthers. And as we talked about last week, he's pulled himself back together into being a real playmaker, and he made plays. He had some real big gaffes with some of those 8 incompletions. Mm-hmm. But when this team needed him to make plays, he did it.
It's really interesting because, and we mentioned this last week as well, these quarterbacks who fail early, become journeymen, and then become these successful reclamation projects. The main ones that come to mind right now being Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Geno Smith. What do those guys have in common? They were all really high draft picks for a reason.
Yep.
Right? I mean, so if they get in the right situation with the right coaches, the right system, coaches that can emphasize their strengths, and they have the right kind of team around them. I mean, all of that. It's all about the environment and whatnot, and and those guys can take advantage. And we've seen those high draft picks who look like total flameouts become really, really good quarterbacks for teams that are playing some pretty good football right now. A couple of lingering issues with the Packers that definitely need to be addressed moving forward. The two that stand out to me that are lingering are the issues in the kicking game with Narveson missing 2 more field goals. That's 5 misses, including the one that was wiped out by the penalty in Tennessee. 5 missed field goals in 4 games, all of the missed field goals under 50 yards. Packers have to do better there. They're expressing their confidence in Narveson. They want this young man to work through it. They need to get more production when they send the field goal unit on the field. The other lingering issue is penalties. 8 more in this game, most of them in the first half. Packers played a lot cleaner in the second half. But with 8 penalties, that's now 34 penalties, not including declined or offsetting. 34 penalties in 4 games.
Yeah.
It's got to change. I mean, it's got to change for the Packers to be able to be the team that they want to and expect to be.
Yeah, and it was hard in this game because I think they finished with 8 for 68, and 5 of them were in the first quarter.
And 4 of them defensively on one drive.
On one drive. And that's going to make an impact on things. So for Green Bay, I'm with you 100%. I mean, that's this roller coaster of 10, 5, 10, 8. You have to smooth those waters out. And again, that's not that there's ever like one set blueprint for how you win football games, but that's what the Packers did really well when Matt LaFleur got here that first season. They didn't put themselves in negative yardage situations. Yep. This offense is 5 times more explosive today than it was in 2019. But the 2019 team was so methodical and so successful because it negated the turnovers, and it negated the negative yardage plays. As far as Narveson, this is going to be a real quandary for the Packers because I agree with Matt LaFleur and I agree with Brian Gutekunst. This is the guy they went with, and I said it to you the day that the Packers made that decision. We're going to cut our kickers and we're going to claim this guy from Tennessee. That's a big decision, and you have to really take that decision to heart as far as what your plan is going to be and how you're going to proceed with this young man. Anders Carlson had the full bandwidth of last season. Would have been interested to see how Green Bay would have handled that if he hadn't gotten off to the start that he did last year. He was very hot for those first 5 games.
Yep.
But a lot of times, when I said this to you before too, with Brian Gutekunst, a lot of times GMs will get on themselves too much about moving on from a kicker, moving on from a specialist. But the reality is it is a performance-based business, and there are guys you can bring in anywhere at any time that can do the job without having to quote-unquote learn a playbook. So when you look at guys that end up buying themselves time and end up earning opportunities and becoming entrenched kickers in this league, Michael, it's not a big secret. It's usually because they made a boatload of kicks right off the bat, and that's how they did it. That's how that young man has done it in Atlanta these last few years. So it's a tough spot to be in. The Packers believe in him. You and I have seen the leg strength. It is prototypical leg strength, but you got to put it through the uprights.
Yeah, you got to make kicks. As Mason Crosby used to say, my job is to make kicks.
My job is to make kicks.
You said that for a lot of years.
Should be on his Packers Hall of Fame plaque someday.
Yeah.
My job was to make kicks. I don't know if we're wrapping this all up, so I want to say this. I did not talk enough about Jayden Reed. I just need to say this because I've written about it. We've talked about it. I'm so happy Matt LaFleur mentioned at his press conference on Monday, he felt like he had 3 outstanding catches in that game. My takeaway, and I ended up doing it as my key to the game, my takeaway was, and I'm the last person that's going to label receivers, but I thought Jayden Reed proved in this game that when the chips are down, he's the guy you go to. Mm-hmm. And it's not because, he's better than anybody else. The catches he made and the situations he made and his body positioning in that game, whether it was in the middle of the field, in the backfield, coming across the middle, Jayden Reed showed that he's not the Green Bay Packers Deebo Samuel. He is the Green Bay Packers Jayden Reed. And this young man, Tom Fanning, cooked up the stat. I don't have it all in front of me, but his production through his first 20 games in the National Football League is almost unparalleled.
Yeah.
And when the Packers needed a playmaker, when someone needed to step up, that man was Jayden Reed. And I don't think you can give him enough flowers for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be exciting to see where this goes. We talked about it after the Brazil game, and I think the word that I used at the time is electrifying. He is, and the Packers have had some big-time playmakers here over the years. We've seen plenty of them, but I don't think I've ever tagged the word electrifying on anybody. There's a different presence to him as a playmaker. He as you say, he's not the Packers Deebo Samuel. He is his own guy, and you can't compare him to anybody in Packers history either. Whether you're talking about some of the greatest playmakers that we've seen this century in Green Bay, he's different. And he's a treat to watch. I will take care of sponsor business here, and then I'm just going to get one more thought from you before we go. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl of Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. You said it earlier in the show. The NFC North might be the best division in football. Where things stand right now, the Minnesota Vikings are 4-0. The Detroit Lions, with their quarterback going 18 for 18 on Monday Night Football, no incompletions, and catching a touchdown pass of his own from his wide receiver. The Detroit Lions are 3-1. They knocked off the previously undefeated Seattle Seahawks, who put up over 500 yards of offense and still lost by 2 touchdowns. So go figure on that one. And then the Packers and the Bears are both 2-2. So if the math is right in my head, 4-3-2-2, 11-5. The NFC North collectively is 11-5 after 4 weeks. That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
And there's only been one division game, Packers and Vikings, where you get the automatic win, automatic loss for somebody. There's only been one division game through 4 weeks in this division, and the collective record of the division is 11-5. That's pretty impressive.
And this, I'm going to bring this up right now with my little pen because I want to make sure I get this right. 18 completions on 18 attempts for 292 yards with 2 touchdowns. Wow.
Yeah.
Jared Goff and what he has done, how many times this guy has been written off right from his rookie year with St. Louis to not being the guy that can get the Rams over the hump.
Even though they went to a Super Bowl with him.
Even though they went to a Super Bowl with him, to becoming what was believed to be a placeholder quarterback in Detroit to being a $53 million a year quarterback that's playing the way he's playing right now. They're built, man. Amon-Ra St. Brown made an absolute jaw-dropping catch in the end zone.
That toe tap touchdown, man, that was, yeah.
The referees couldn't even believe it.
No.
I mean, that game, one, in addition to being a very electrifying, very exciting football game, it again spoke to just how dangerous the Lions are. All 4 of these teams in the NFC North are going to do it differently this year.
Yep.
It's going to be really interesting watching every single one of these battles between these teams because they all do different things well. But, I mean, you look at what the Lions are doing and the way they're built and how they've responded to how last season ended for them, they are not to be trifled with. The one thing I will say, though, Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker III, they did take it to that defense a little bit. They had to, but
they just couldn't finish drives.
Yeah.
When they were on the edge of field goal range, they couldn't get into field goal range to make a kick. And then, late in the game when they're going for it on fourth downs and whatnot, they couldn't get the scores that they needed. They racked up over 500 yards, but it was like, most of the times when they crossed midfield, it felt like they played the whole game in Detroit territory. But Detroit's defense, with its back against the wall on several drives, just stood tall and got the job done, to where the point total ends up being, 27 or 29 or something like that, with over 500 yards of offense. The Detroit defense, for all the yards they gave up, they still got a lot of stops.
They did.
And that was really the difference in the game.
The one thing working against Green Bay, too, is they're going to have to basically play probably 2 track meets against the Lions this season. They don't get a real cold weather game against them. So, it's going to be exciting.
The Packers are going to see Geno Smith and the Seahawks later on this
They will.
as well.
Yeah, Geno Smith is kind of in a similar boat, almost kind of where Jordan Love has been at, where he's made some really good plays, but the turnovers have been hard to overcome for them at this point. And defensively, again, they were banged up on defense going in. They knew they were kind of up against it defensively, and the Lions really took advantage of the Seahawks missing some key pieces. And I was already in bed at this point when you texted me. I was getting my beauty rest, but
when I didn't get a response, I figured you must have turned in.
I think I turned on some Netflix and I'm like laying in my bed. But I will say you were right in your assessment, where it's like, defense, man, if you can get it in this league, great.
Yep.
But boy, I'm not saying it's optional, but there's games like this where it's like, okay, which offense isn't going to make as many mistakes is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, sometimes that's the way these games go. Well, with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.